Hey everyone, it's Andy Kushner with The Wedding Biz, brought to you by Party Slate, our title sponsor, the first website designed specifically for event professionals and venues. And on The Wedding Biz, I conduct in-depth and revealing interviews of icons of the event and wedding industry. This is all to provide education and inspiration for any entrepreneur, but especially those of us in the event industry. And I'll tell you, it is a nice, crisp fall day outside. I'm feeling good today. You know what? I feel like when we're really overwhelmed, which I've been talking about for a while now, and everyone I know is like just working like crazy this time of year, is all I can do is have a good day each day. Just focus on that day. And I have a morning routine. Do you? I think most of us do have some kind of routine. I wake up early, I stretch for a few minutes, I meditate, I basically do transcendental meditation, which I highly, highly recommend. Game changer. Maybe someday I'll bring someone on to talk about that. And then I work out. I either do something cardio, like run or on an elliptical. The other mornings I do weights, and just to stay toned and defined. But that gets everything going. It gets my blood going, gets the energy going. I need that burst of whatever it is, endorphins or whatever those things are. And so, yeah, feeling good today. I hope you are too. So if you missed last week's episode, it was Greg Fink, photographer based in Paris. Greg worked for 10 years as a marketing executive for a major Fortune 500 company and is now full-time doing major weddings with part of his business in fashion. And he quickly learned how to most effectively utilize social media. And he gives masterclasses and workshops. And he's speaking at Engage in just a week in London about authentic branding. So real good episode last week if you missed it. Can't wait to tell you about today's guest, and it is Vanessa KRECKEL of Two Paper Dolls. Vanessa, I have known for many, many, many years. She talks in this conversation about the art of branding, logo development, website design and development, invitation design, use of social media, and essentially talking about developing a brand voice that really sets you apart. And we also talk about how she manages her business and the importance of building a company culture. So this was a wide-ranging interview. Enjoy my conversation with Vanessa KRECKEL. Hey, Vanessa, welcome to The Wedding Biz. It's so fun having you on the show today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Well, and you know who else is really excited about you being on, which are the people. I mean, I've already known you a long time, and I know how talented you are. But it was Rebecca and Catherine, founders of Engage, who were saying, you got to have Vanessa on, you got to have them on. So I know they're like your biggest supporters.
Yes, totally. That's amazing. We've done so much work with them for the last 11 years, and they've been amazing clients of ours, and we're so happy to be a part of such an amazing event and opportunity. So, yeah.
And later on, I'm going to come back to it, but I know that you also speak at Engage, about the art of branding and building a successful design business as well. And so, we're going to come back to that and kind of dig in. But I'm curious when you first started to feel the passion for doing this and how it manifested.
Yeah. So we are, as a company, about to go into our 20th year in business in 2020.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I started this, 19 plus years ago at my dining room table. I was working a full-time job at the University of Pennsylvania, designing publications and, working in their athletic department, doing a lot of writing and design. And, it was something that I started to do on the side for friends and friends of friends, and then sort of just grew and grew and became a business before I knew it. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have any money. I just kind of did what I loved to do. And, that was sort of design invitations for people who were getting married and, having life events and celebrations. And at the time, it was definitely something that was not a common thing. Like there were tons of places where you could go and get things out of books and change wording and things like that. But, really sort of the art of what goes into creating something custom wasn't really out there the way it is today. I feel like today it's everywhere and there are so many people doing this, but we really sort of, kind of started.
But how, Vanessa, like, how did you even know how to do this? Did you study graphic arts like in school? Where'd this come from?
I did. I did. I went to, my undergrad degree is in communications and computer science. And then I went back to art school at Moore College of Art and Design in Philadelphia. And, I learned a lot of kind of what goes into graphic design and all of that. But before I went back to school, I sort of had already kind of done a lot, self-taught in a lot of these programs in Adobe and things like that. And just, I've always had a background of, being super creative and artistic and, really loved like the tactileness of different materials and paper and, have always done that, like even since, I was a child.
But how did you make that transition? I mean, you mentioned you were working at University of Pennsylvania, and I know you were frustrated, by like you were saying, the limitations of the standards of basically the industry at that time in invitation design, and in a little bit we're going to definitely get into branding because I know that's a big part of your success and also what you offer for people. But that transition from having a job, because you said a few minutes ago you didn't really have any money. So how did you start how did you transition into full time? Was it just a little at a time until you had enough? Yeah,
I just honestly did it. I think taking risks is definitely something that has always been inside of me. Like, since I was even little, like I would sort of always just do something and figure it out later. And, I loved what I was doing. I, was working 60, 70 hours a week at a full-time job and would come and do this like nights and weekends at home. And so I've always found, when I'm passionate about something, I just figure out a way to make it work. And I think that's even the way that we still operate today, like even with a very successful agency and, a team of 25, like it's still my mindset. And I think going out on a limb and having an idea and running with it and figuring it out later is just inside of me.
Just going for it.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, you mentioned taking risk, and I noticed on your website you wrote, or someone wrote, at the heart of Two Paper Dolls Design House lies Vanessa's infatuation with storytelling, typography, and art, and her fearless approach to delving into unfamiliar territory while taking risks all day long. Can you say more about what those risks are? I have assumptions, but what do you mean by that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so basically, to sort of rewind back to, the early days of doing this, I left Penn in 2000 and I want to say 2003, and I, found this little spot in Wayne, Pennsylvania, right outside of Philadelphia on the main line, and I basically had no idea how I would afford to rent it, but I was like, I'm going to figure this out, and I did that, and clients came, the local news came and filmed us in this 400 square foot office. Like, I remember we had like invitations, like literally taped to the wall, and it was like super cute. But like, I look back on that and I'm like, oh my God. And so, it's just stuff like that. I just, I would, after, a really short time of being on my own, I, found an employee, who's still with me today. And I just kept growing and growing and growing. And, we decided that, we were designing all this really cool stuff and we were having other people produce our work. And I was like, we should produce our own work. So, with zero knowledge of, how to use a letterpress or figure that out, I just basically found this guy who was 90 years old selling his 2 letterpresses in a garage. I rented a U-Haul. I paid $900 for them. I brought them back to Wayne, and I, we figured it out. We figured out how to use them. And, over the years, we grew that little army of presses to, about 13 different machines. And, we were designing and producing our own work. And
so you got to take that leap. It's funny that when you're talking about this, I'm thinking about, there's this, I don't want to say a cliche, maybe a quote or whatever it is. It's, leap off the cliff and trust that the net will appear.
That's right.
And I've always been like that too. But, and I'm finding I used to have such a God, I was just really hesitant to dive into any new technology. I mean, even cell phones, it took me a long time to get into, and right, and different kinds of computers switching over and all that stuff. And I, like you, I figured, you know what, just take the leap. And then, not that that will appear in that situation, but just take the leap and you have no choice. Just figure it out, right? It's like, I feel like if I assume that I will figure it out, it helps calm me down and it helps me to actually figure it out.
Absolutely. Yes.
Well, I want to get into branding too, because another point you make on the on your website about branding and logo development is that it is the most important step in any creative process, and it's what initially sets your business or your product apart. So, can you talk about that, about branding and then logo development as related to that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's certainly been, a really big part of our agency. We still do a lot of social projects, meaning sort of weddings and parties and celebrations for, many clients all over the world and legacy clients for years and years. But a lot of that is related. A lot of times when we do that kind of stuff, like we're actually branding an event. And then when it comes to, actual branding and logo development, website design and development, we do all of that in-house, from start to finish. And really, we're really big into the space of storytelling and utilizing what sets a business apart from, its competitor. We're so fortunate to be, in this space of the event world and beyond, where there are so many talented, creative, amazing people doing amazing things. And, I find that every weekend these people are, producing parties or photographing parties or doing things for other clients, and their work is superior, and basically it leaves little time for them to sort of work on their own brand and what that looks like and how they set themselves apart and the touch points that go along with that. And I think we have been hired by so many people to really refine that and reinvent people who have been around for years and years, and basically start from scratch with people who are starting a new venture. And so it's been a really amazing process, because we spend so much time before we even start to design something to learn about this client and, learn what makes them tick, learn what makes them different, and, really set a strategy in place and some messaging and a voice that really sort of sets them apart from their competitor. And, we've worked very much with people in the same space and the same line of work that are competitors, and we've managed to sort of really be able to set them apart from each other and be successful in doing so. And I think, that's what makes what we do so fun, because the possibilities are endless. And I find that, when a client allows us to sort of do what we do best and sort of just run with something, and obviously we get a lot of feedback along the way from them, but it really takes things to the next level.
Well, if I could jump in. So let's say that you're not involved in helping somebody do this and they're just on their own. Because I know you give classes, master sessions on this as well.
Yeah.
First of all, what are the different elements of a brand, and what is the first step that someone listening should do to help really dive into their own brand and start to figure out what that is and how to express it? What are some of the first steps?
I think some of the first steps are really defining who your client is and who you are and what you believe in, and, where you want to be in 5 years or 10 years. And so that's a really big part of our initial conversations and process. And so looking at that and working with people to help figure that out, so many people are so caught up in their own clients and their own business, they very rarely have time to do a deep dive into that kind of information and really sit down and talk about it and flush through it. And I think, what we've found over the years is it's so surprising, what comes out of those conversations and those sessions that really helps us take things to the next level.
But what are some of the questions? Again, let's say that you're not there and they're in a room by themselves, their team. What are some of the questions they should ask each other?
I think really it starts with, who is your ideal client?
Like create an avatar? Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, like who's your ideal client? Like, are you in a luxury market? Are you in a middle market? Do you want to do, if we're talking specifically about the wedding industry, and maybe say it's a planner, like, do you want to do 5 really amazing weddings a year, or do you want to do 30? What is it that you want to do, and how do you want to be positioned? And so the positioning is really sort of a big part of what we do before we even get to any kind of creative or logo development. And so what is the voice of your company? Like, how do you interact with, clients and potential clients? Like, are you friendly? Are you very rigid and by the book? Are you flexible? Are you, all of those things are sort of really kind of important. And when we develop a brand, we develop a voice, and we do a lot of copywriting and messaging that kind of goes along with that. And once we solidify that, then we move into the creative process of, a visual identity, basically, that, is a logo and a secondary mark and tertiary mark and pattern development and, typography and things like that. So we sort of build like this whole toolkit of, what a client can take and use as their entire brand. And so in our initial process of, messaging and voice and things like that, like what we're trying to create is a standard, consistent message that both, the owner of the business and every person on their team, like literally speaks the same language when they speak about the company.
That's a really good point. Yeah. So consistency even within the company, which then leads to the voice, the message.
Exactly. Because the third employee that you have should be able to speak about the business the same exact way that you do. And so when that message is consistent and there's a thread that runs through all of that, the more trust your brand can build with the people who are engaging with your brand.
Do you know what? I don't know. All of a sudden, I'm thinking of this. There's this company that I had to call recently, and I'm real familiar with the owner of the company and a fair amount of the upper staff of the company. And I remember calling, I called the regular main number, and the receptionist, it really struck me how the receptionist was not that friendly, was just, there was something like to me, that's the first touch point, is even who answers the phone. And I'm just thinking what you're saying, had they sat down with everyone, including even the receptionist, and talk about what is that brand voice? And like you said, what are the choices? Is it going to be real soft, personable? And especially with this whole thing with authenticity, I think that's really critical now. But whatever it is, to discuss it so that it's the entire company, even the receptionist. And
yes.
Because that really threw me. I even said something to the owner. It felt a little awkward, but he's somewhat of a friend. And I said to him, I think you need to either get a different receptionist or have a talk with this person, because it's just not reflecting the brand I know, and that's the first, like I say, it's the first touch point.
Exactly. Absolutely. It's so important that, that continuity flows through an entire organization, or, it can have negative effects for sure.
I'd love to hear you talk more about storytelling, and applying that to the personal branding for, whether it's a wedding social client, luxury niche businesses, corporate clients, whatever, how to create the story aspect of it.
I think in this day and age where design is really prominent in so many of our lives, and, especially people in our industry, it's really important that things look a certain way and feel a certain way. And I think that's all great. And there's so many talented people that can design pretty things or, clever things. But I think the way that we at TPD really approach this is that we want each event to be special, and, not like the wedding someone was at 2 weeks ago, and not like the brand someone just talked to the other day. Like, how do you set this apart, and what's the story? And so, obviously we do a lot of that through our research and our messaging and our strategy and our positioning and all of that. But, when we get into sort of creative, it's really important for us to be able to, design something that's super clever or really high touch or really beautiful. But when you look at it and you take it apart, or you sort of see something else, like you can sort of see into it and you can sort of dissect, like, oh my God, there's a moment of like, I totally get this. This is so creative and so clever. And, we have a lot of people who have that reaction to our work, and like that's like what we live for, right? For example, I'm in the throes of this right now, so I feel like speak to it. I'm literally in the throes of Engage London, right? So we're heading to London for Engage in 2 weeks, and we've created the brand for this entire event. And we created this icon that is basically looks like a key, where the bottom is, the signature Engage E, for example, and the top is basically what an old fashioned key would look like, but it actually is a crown. And then and then there's a flag of London sort of built into the design. And it's not all obvious at the very first glance. Like, you sort of have to look at it for a second and say, oh my God, like, I see this, I see that, I see this. And so together and apart, like, that tells such a cool story, and we're able to, speak to it and how we got to this point. And, it really creates like a lot of buy-in from people to be able to experience something that doesn't just look pretty, right? Like, it has a story, and we can tell a story through our work, and it's sort of just like this amazing experience.
If you are an event planner, venue, caterer, photographer, or any other industry professional, you really should be aware of and using the Party Slate marketing platform. And I want to say, I only work with sponsors whose product or service I'm either fully aware of or even use myself. So you can create a free profile that can act as a photo-rich portfolio, or Party Slate has additional membership options available. And if you're planning or involved with an event, from weddings to fundraisers to baby showers and really everything in between, you should use Party Slate to get inspired. Save your favorite ideas and contact top professionals to help create your dream event. New photos from real events are uploaded to Party Slate daily, and their editorial team publishes articles that highlight the latest trends and planning tips. It is a really great site. You've got to visit partyslate.com to get started. And again, that's partyslate.com. So Vanessa, I want to talk about website design and development. The digital world is just constantly changing. I mean, the speed at which it changes is crazy. And, when I even think about my own website, I've had several, and I feel like it's so frustrating to me. How do you suggest people consider their own website design and development in today's world? What should they look for? How should they approach it?
I know it is constantly an ever-changing beast. And I definitely think, sort of being relevant is difficult when things change so rapidly. I think having a site that, is user-friendly, user experience is as important, if not more, than the beauty or the, what something looks like on a website. I think a responsive website where, 80, 90% of sites are viewed only basically on mobile these days.
That's right. God, is that a challenge? Yeah.
Yeah, it is a challenge. And so, mobile first is obviously super important. There's also a very prominent issue right now in the world of web, and that is ADA compliance, where, your site really needs to be adapted for blind and deaf people.
Whoa, are you kidding? This is the first time I'm hearing about this.
Yeah, it's a really big deal.
How do you do that?
So I will totally probably mess this up because I am not a web developer, but our team of web developers is well versed in this. And so, I've learned obviously from them, but there are companies out there today that basically will certify a site to be ADA compliant. There have been people who have been dropping lawsuits left and right against companies for, not being ADA compliant. And so there is definitely a lot of back-end code work that, ensures a lot of this. There is, in terms of images and things like that, like there's a certain way that things should be displayed. It's a whole industry at this point. And we've actually worked with 2 or 3 companies who solely focus on this, and they just do ADA compliance for websites, because we've had clients be sued, who have come to us basically after a lawsuit and said, I need to redo my website. Here's the deal. We've gone through training courses about this and different things. And so we learned so much, but it is a very prominent issue right now.
Well, and, when you were mentioning that mobile first, and the experience, I love that. And I would think that it's something that we could test out in the process of having our own websites designed is, and of course, obviously it follows branding. So I get that. But when it starts to get designed, maybe to have people outside of the industry actually, kind of test it out and tell us what it's like.
Exactly.
Yeah, because that's really, I love what you're saying, that it is an experience. To me, everything should be an experience, right? Whether we're dealing within the industry, B2B business, or B2C with consumers.
100%.
Right?
Yes.
Like I was saying about the receptionist when you called, right there, that's an opportunity. I consider it an opportunity. So same thing with the website. And, at first I was really fighting it myself that, geez, most people are using their mobile phones or iPad or something like that. And now, I feel like I've got to embrace it. That is where the world is going. And so my website's got to be really easy. It needs to have that experiential focus on it on a small device, right? So
absolutely. Yes.
What about social media? Now, that is obviously critical, for people to understand the influence of social media. I'm wondering if you could tell me about it on a company's target market and the effect that social media can have on a brand. How do you loop in and look at social media?
Yeah. So I think social media, is as important, if not almost more important than a website these days. I think it's where everyone sort of goes to sort of see the most current, up-to-date situation of any company or brand in real time, basically. And so, what you're posting on social media, what the messaging is, like how you're speaking, what your tone is, what the images look like, what your feed looks like there's a lot of high pressure there in terms of what should I post? What looks good? What sounds good? What do people want to hear? There's a lot of sort of figuring out of what works, what doesn't work, and how that all works together that I think is really important. People who are engaged with different brands, they want to be heard. They want to feel like they're a part of it, and they want to feel like they're in the experience. And so when there's buy-in from a consumer like that, I think that it's, very successful.
Yeah, it is. And also, we can't, a social media campaign, bringing it back to brand awareness, can't live without it, right? In terms of working that in. I like how you talk about how it all has to reflect. In a sense, the social media needs to reflect what you're doing with your website, your brand message, and vice versa. I think a lot of people, when I talk to friends about social media, from what I find, it's generally, there's really not a strategy. It's more like, well, the strategy seems to be, I'm going to post X amount of times a day or a week. And, I want to get these photos. I'm going to do some live feed stuff like that. But people don't talk about a business strategy to social media. I don't hear that much.
Yeah. So, I think it depends. I think it depends on the size of the brand and the audience that the brand has. But really, we engage with, strategy for social media in a lot of brands that we work with, and I follow this, obviously I follow so many different brands. And I think in sort of watching what other people do, you kind of come up with ideas of things that look successful. And, you can measure a lot of this with analytics, how many views are things getting and
yeah.
When's the right time to post. And so, we definitely pay attention to that, I think. And I think that anybody should pay attention to that because posting too many times a day, not posting enough, it's all this very high pressure, stressful world of
it feels that way. It does.
Knowing what to do and I posted something but I didn't get that many likes,
right.
So maybe that wasn't something that people want to see, and maybe it was just the wrong time of day. You know what I mean? So it's there's a lot of things that go into it to make it successful, and I think it's a lot of trial and error. It's not going to be the same for every single brand. When is your audience online? What excites them? You have to really figure that out, I think, on a case-by-case basis a lot of times.
Yeah, so don't just throw it up against the wall. Well, I want to also get specific in invitations. I know that's the core of your business. So I want to ask, when you're talking to brides, your team's talking to brides, and also people in the industry, planners who are guiding their clients, their couples along the way, whether it's a bride or a couple, what should they consider when thinking about their invitations?
I think people should consider the overall look and feel of an event, which sometimes that's driven from a planner or designer. Sometimes it gets driven, in the initial stages by, a stationer who's doing sort of a lot of the, assets for branding and things like that. Where is your wedding? How do you want your guests to feel? Is it one day? Is it an entire weekend of like experiential, really amazing events? How do we set this apart? And so typically there's a lot that goes into it, and it's not just an invitation. It starts with a save the date. It's a website, invitation design, and then day of, which, can be sort of, menus and place cards and table numbers and things like that. And then, also like a lot of installations, like, really exciting things that like guests can interact with, like, not just putting place cards on a table, but, creating an entire, interactive sort of like basically wall that, people can use as an escort display or something like that. And so a lot of large scale, cool graphics that become part of the decor of a party and things like that. And so it's much bigger than just sort of an invitation these days, I think, especially for, what we do and our clients. But, I see, there's so many others doing this as well. I think, it's the overall experience and how that all ties together and what's the thread that runs through it. Like when you have an event and it's branded, you don't want to put the same exact thing on every single piece of communication, but you want to have the entire event be able to tell the same story. Does that make sense?
It does. How are the buying habits related to this changing? I mean, because I know they are. Like, right? Even in the last 3 to 5 years, it seems like we're going much more, and I'm assuming in invitations too, like the rest of the industry, it's more from going from tradition to really being different. And again, telling the story as opposed to a standard, beautiful maybe type of invitation, but telling the story of the couple.
Yeah, I think it goes both ways. There are definitely some folks out there that, are still very much into tradition and, maybe want to keep, the actual wedding invitations sort of a little bit more traditional. And then the rest of things can sort of be a little bit more out of the box or, different and unique. And it's about experience, and especially the generations that are getting married now. Everybody can have everything at a moment's notice, or, you know what I mean? Like there's no waiting for things, or, everything's available basically real time to everyone. And so to create something that's experiential that, somebody hasn't seen before, or, get somebody excited about something, that's really where it's at, I think, because we've all been to a million weddings. We've all seen a million things. And so it's really like, how do we do something that's going to really blow people's minds or get them excited, or, have them be like, I am not missing this wedding, so that's how we approach it for sure.
Oh, that's a good point. Get that emotional kind of feel right from the start of looking at the invitation that I've got to be there.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. I also want to move into the business aspect of what you're doing, Vanessa. I know you have 24 full-time employees, including graphic designers and web developers, project managers, and people in production. And how did you learn to create the business aspect of this? Because, I mean, your success is heavily due as well, not just the creative side of what we've been talking about this entire time, but how you are managing that business aspect of your company.
Yeah, so I learn every day. I still do. And, it took a long time because, I think as a creative person, my personality is very much laid back, and, I'm not overbearing, or I don't get crazy angry, or, nothing like that. So, sometimes I would like let a lot of things go, and it just became, as I built up and, had people join our team over the years, like obviously I've learned a lot. Like I've learned a lot from mistakes that I've made. I've learned a lot from successes I've celebrated, with these people. And, I'm really fortunate, I think, to have such a huge team. We just hired 2 more people. So now we're at 26 actually. And so, I think one of the things is we've created this culture here, and we've created a culture where people are responsible for their own projects, and there's a lot of buy-in to the company as a whole because we're doing so many like exciting things, and really being able to travel and go all over the globe basically to do what we do, and creating an atmosphere where it's pretty laid back. Like, we bring our dogs to work, we have a good time, we work really hard. Sometimes we're here till 10 o'clock at night, sometimes we leave at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. There's a lot of balance, and sometimes when we're in like a really big push of things, there's like a trade-off for that, right? And so I think being flexible and allowing people to have like a real voice, and it's not just mine all the time. I've learned so much from my team and the ideas that they bring to the table, and how to really hear people when they speak to you, and how to manage them, and how to let them tell you what they need and respond accordingly, like, I think has been a really instrumental part of our success and our growth, for sure.
Do you have a formal way of doing that? I mean, do you have one-on-one meetings, group meetings, brainstorming sessions?
We do. We have one-on-one meetings for sure. I have created with an organization, a really great sort of management team that we do a lot of high-level thinking with.
What do you mean by that?
We do a lot of, if we have a big idea for the company, like, I don't just come to work one day and say, guys, we're doing this. Like, I say, I have this idea, or someone will say, I have this idea, and we'll sort of talk about it collectively, like in a small group, and figure out like, hey, this is a really awesome idea. Like, let's try this.
Ooh, so you're including them in a sense in the brainstorming.
I'm including them in decision making and brainstorming. And, I've got a lot of buy-in that way, I think. And
right.
I really, I wouldn't be where I am today without the team that I have. Some of them have been here for 6-7 years, and our office collectively is basically under the age of 40. So that's a really long time for somebody who's in that millennial category to keep a job in the same place, and like it, and want to continue to be here.
True.
I treat them very well with benefits and holidays and flex time and things like that. And I think that's got to go both ways. Like, if I want somebody to bust their ass for me, like, I've got to do the same for them, like when they need something, and so it's collaborative. And I think, it comes the same way, like when we hire, new hires in our office, like, I don't do it. Like, basically they do it. They go through, the interview process, they bring people in, and, when it comes time, like, and they're like, this is the person, and they'll be like, boss, we want you to meet with them. And I'm like, by that point, like, I'm sold, because they're going to own this, and I think it's really important, and it's been really instrumental into our culture. And I mean, I can't say enough amazing things about them.
What a great idea to do that, for you to have, I mean, talk about buy-in, and right. And also the people who are working on the front lines know what's really needed in whatever that position is.
Correct.
And then you don't have to sweat and go crazy over this either.
Yeah. And it's not like, it doesn't feel like a dictatorship where, like, I'm like, oh, I hired this person and I hope you like them. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's a lot of different personalities, and a lot of people, are looking at this from, a lot of different angles, like, what do we really need? Like, how are they going to fit into our culture? Like, do they have an ego? Are they, a team player? Like, there's so many different things. And I think, talent is one thing, but, having that attitude of like, willingness to learn and willingness to be part of a team, those two things, you don't find those two things on a resume, and they're not, you can't teach them. Like, I feel like they're sort of innate in a person. And so we really make sure, that somebody who comes into our organization has those things.
Yeah. Well, before we close, I'd like to ask you, how do you, Vanessa, view success? Like, what does that mean to you?
Wow. That is
a good existential one there.
That is a good one. I think that success is a combination of winning really small battles of like challenges, right? It could be getting a client that you were like dying to have, or being asked to do work for somebody that you were like totally thought you were out of their league or whatever. Like those things sort of are success. But to me, I've sort of found that success is really sort of growing together in the same direction. And all those things are important. But, we've been able to grow our company year over year, and learned from a lot of different things along the way, obviously. And profitability is important, and happiness in our culture is one of the most important things to me. So knowing that I've sort of figured that piece of it out, that really defines success for me, because I could never do this alone. And so I feel super fortunate to sort of be growing in that direction, year over year, month after month, with these people who consistently have your back and want the same things. And it's been really, honestly, really amazing. And I think it's just going to continue.
Wow, that's great. And look, before we go, I want to suggest to people, I know it was years ago, you had helped to produce this, talk about a story and an emotional one, a video for my music and entertainment company, Kushner Entertainment. You helped with a video, which I call like an entertainment design. It was about the entertainment design we do.
Yes.
And I heard that you still talk about that in some of your classes.
I do.
We should put a link in. Maybe I'll put a link in the show notes so people can see what you've done with it, because it really helps tie together a whole lot of what we've been speaking about this entire time.
It really is. Yeah, it's phenomenal. And I do still share that when I speak very often. I think that was a really great example of, emotional connection to a brand, and how you can really get people to buy into what you're doing without being salesy or giving a pitch for yourself. You were just doing what you do, and there was such an emotional connection to it that people could relate to. And I feel like that is a huge example of, kind of what we do every day, day in and out for our clients.
Yeah. It was really moving. Well, thanks so much. This has really been a blast. I appreciate it.
Yeah, totally. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Vanessa KRECKEL of Two Paper Dolls. Be sure to check out her website, which is twopaperdolls.com. For social media handles, on Instagram, you can find her at TPD Design House. TPD Design House. On Facebook at Two Paper Dolls. All of this is in the show notes at our website of theweddingbiz.com. Please share this episode with your friends and colleagues. So much good information. Anyone who you feel can benefit from it, would love for you to share it. And also give us great reviews. It helps people find us. And I am always very grateful when people do that, when you do that for me and for our community. And don't forget to listen to our follow-on segment with each interview, The Next Level, which comes out every Wednesday, in which my co-hosts and I tease out some of the highlights of the interview to help break them down into specific tactics, really, and tips for you to raise your own business to the next level. And this week's guest co-host is going to be Sean Lowe of the business of being creative. I've had Sean on the show a lot. He has so much to offer. Be sure to check it out. And next week's guest is going to be Audrey Nerakoulis, a Paris-based photographer whose style is absolutely stunning and emotional and recognizable in terms of her own brand voice. We also talk about her brilliant use of social media. She is absolutely incredible with that, especially with Instagram. She's done amazing things and gives great tips and ideas. So be sure to check in next week to listen to Audrey's interview. Want to remind you to please subscribe to the show so you get notifications, and you could even set your phone to automatically download them. Be sure to follow us on Instagram in particular at The Wedding Biz. This is the same with Facebook, but especially Instagram at The Wedding Biz. And lastly, we want to thank our sponsor, Party Slate, at partyslate.com. Again, partyslate.com, and we'll catch you next week on The Wedding Biz.